Welcome back, guys. And it's time to show you what your lab looks like. In this class, you're going to be using Chrome. And if you click on Chrome, you're going to notice that we have prepared some shortcuts. Here you can see that we have a shortcut to connect to the vCenter server. And if you take a look, when you log in, you need to use the typical account, which is going to be administrator at the vsphere.local. The password is VMware1 exclamation point, uppercase V, uppercase M. Now, besides, of course, using the vSphere client, you also have right here, PuTTY, multiple tab PuTTY. And if you take a look, you have the ability to PuTTY into any of the ES6 servers, including also the vCenter server. So just for kicks, I'm going to connect to one of the hosts. You can see we have enabled SSH. So let's take a look at what we have. First of all, some people prefer the clear theme, the light theme. Other people prefer the dark theme. Myself, I prefer the dark theme. So one of the choices you have in 7.0 Update 1, and this is not new, of course, is to switch from one theme to the other. I'm going to be using the dark theme, which looks beautiful in my opinion, and it's easier on your eyes. Now, as you can see here, you have one vCenter server at the very top. The name is SAVCSA01. You have two 4-node clusters. They're identical with one exception. As you can see here, one has 3 running VMs. The other one does not. Now, when you take a look, I'm going to select one of these particular clusters. And if you take a look, I just booted up this lab. So I want you to ignore this particular flag of mine. Now, the way that it works here is we have 2 4-node clusters. Notice carefully they're in the same data center. And if you take a look, both have the same number of disk groups and both have the same number of disks. Therefore, both have the same size when it comes to the vSAN data store. If you take a look at one of these, doesn't matter which one, you're going to notice that the size of the vSAN data store is 200 gigs. I'm going to run the command df-h. And here you can see, once again, that this is not a VMFS file system. This is not an NFS file system. This is of the type of vSANFS. You can see it is 200 gigs and it's pretty empty. Now, why is it 200 gigs? Let's take a look. The way we build this environment, we have 4 nodes. Each node has 1 disk group, and each disk group has 1 cache device and 1 capacity device. If you take a look, if you select the cluster, if you go to configure, notice when you go to disk management, you see exactly what I just mentioned. Here, once again, you're going to see 1 disk group per host. The other cluster is identical. And once again, as mentioned earlier, you have 1 cache device that is 5 gigs and a capacity device that is 50 gigs. Notice you have an all-flash architecture. So if you do the math, 50 gigs times 4, that is 200 gigs. Now, let's take a look at the networking layer. In this class, each of the clusters happen to have 1 distributed virtual switch. This distributed virtual switch is used for vMotion, for vSAN, and for your VMs. Now, if I take a look at one of the hosts, what I want to show you here is how we build each ES6 server. So let's take a look at one of the servers, doesn't matter which one. And first, let's take a look at the switches. Now, these hosts have 1 standard switch and 1 distributed switch. The standard switch is using VMNIC 0. That is your typical and standard switch. You can see this is used by the hypervisor. This is your management network. Notice the management network is the 172.20.10 network. And then we have a distributed switch. This distributed switch is using 3 NICs: VMNIC1, VMNIC2, and VMNIC3. VMNIC1 is used by the port group for the VMs. VMNIC2 is the one used by vMotion. And in class, you can see the vMotion network is the 172.20.12 network. Lastly, we have a VM kernel port for vSAN. This VM kernel port for vSAN is in the 10.10.10 network, and this one can only use VMNIC3. Now, the next and final thing that I want to show you in this first demo is that if I select the cluster and I go to configure, when we choose services, let's take a look at what we have enabled and not. Number one, notice when it comes to space efficiency, we don't have the duplication and compression enabled. We don't have compression only enabled. When it comes to encryption, we don't have data at rest encryption enabled, and we don't have data in transit encryption enabled. The performance service is enabled by default. We're not using iSCSI here, therefore that service is disabled. You guys will configure file service, so therefore this is currently disabled. And if you take a look, here we can see that we're going with the default value for your object repair timer. This is the old vSAN CLOM repair delay parameter. Notice, besides that, we have 3 VMs. And if you right click on the VM and you try to open up the console, in this class you're going to realize that we have not installed an operating system. We don't need to do that here. So don't be surprised when you take a look. And again, these VMs don't have Windows installed or Linux installed or anything like that. Notice, this is what you're going to see if they're running. So just ignore that. What else can I show you? When it comes to the cluster, if I go to the DRS is enabled and it is fully automated. And when it comes to HA is also enabled. Please don't confuse regular HA with proactive HA. So that concludes the first demo. Thank you guys, and I'll see you when we go and start the next chapter. Thank you guys.